All right, AP World History students, we are, I don't know, 36 hours from the exam thereabouts, depending on where you are. And it is getting to be crunch time. Yeah, 34 hours, one day, 10 hours, 55 minutes, almost 35 hours to the AP exam. Oh man, I'm starting you out worrying you, but here we are on Fiveable, this live review. We have a ton of people in this chat tonight. We have a lot of people here. So just make sure that we are as best we can staying with what's going on tonight. I'm very excited to have you all with me. Right now, we got over 550 signed up. That number is climbing. We're up to topping 560 right now. Just absolutely insane as we get ready for this AP exam. I am your host for tonight, Patrick Lassiter, and today we're going to be looking at the LEQ. So we're going to be doing some practice with the long essay question today, and along the way, we'll be doing some brainstorming activity. Sorry, I'm getting my screen up. It was in the wrong place. You'll find in the call to action down at the bottom of the screen that we have an LEQ practice we'll be working on together. In fact, we'll take a look at it together. We'll type it up as a group. I might go in a little bit different direction than you, but you're welcome to work through this essay as well. Hopefully by the end of the night, we will have one put together. But before we do that, we're going to kind of loosen up our brains, get some brainstorming done, and then also think about just what it is that that we are doing in this long essay question. First of all, I'm seeing a lot of people putting in the chat where you're from. So rep your town, rep your hometown, your home state. Where are you going to be taking that AP exam this year? And then we will get started. So this chat tonight is all about the long essay question, and certainly we want to take a look at this question, make sure everybody knows the basics around it, what you're going to be seeing when you come to it on the exam, how much it counts and all that, and then how it's graded. I actually grade for the AP exam. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that. I've graded for the LEQ the last 2 years, so hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions. If you have a question tonight, put it down in the chat thing below. There's a section where you can ask a question. Because we have so many people in the chat tonight, I'm going to be honest, for large portions of today, unless I am asking you to put something directly in the chat, I likely will not be looking at it. I'd advise you just to put stuff in there as needed, but if you have a question, put it in the question section. And if you have that question and you see somebody else who has a question similar to you, go ahead and upvote that question. You're more likely to be able to get that question answered. Right now, the top question is a really good one and one that we will talk about tonight. Again, my name is Patrick Lassiter. If you're looking for some additional videos, of course, dig into Fiveable. We have that paid membership. We're getting down to the last couple of days of AP exams. All of our library videos. You can also find me on Twitter at RTHS Wapters or on YouTube at RTHS Patrick Lassiter. Just threw up a couple of new videos today. Going to have another one coming up tonight. Follow us, of course, at Think Five. We'll get all the updates for the AP exam. But this chat isn't about Fiveable. It's about you and the LEQ. The LEQ, of course, stands for the long essay question, which is kind of funny because the DBQ is the longer essay question out of the two, but it is a long form essay as opposed to the short answer questions. And some basic reminders for this LEQ. First of all, you get choice on the LEQ, and that's different than it used to be. It used to be you only had 2 essays. One was a change of continuity, one was a comparison essay, and you had to answer both. But now you have 3 options, of which you only have to choose one. Option 1 will come from time periods 1 or 2, or perhaps cover part of both periods. Option 2 will come from time periods 3 and 4, one or the other, or as I said, a little bit of both. And option 3 will come from either periods 5 or 6, or perhaps a little bit of both. The LEQ is 15% of your exam grade. So it is worth less than the DBQ, which is 25% of your exam grade. And you write it all in the same block of time. So you'll have your, you get to the exam, you have your multiple choice, that's 55 minutes. Then you'll transition into the SAQ, which you'll get 40 minutes for, and then you'll have a 10-minute break. And then you have 100 minutes, that is an hour and 40 minutes of uninterrupted time to write 2 essays. And they only give you just a reminder to move on, but you don't have to go at the times they suggest. The time suggested for the LEQ is 40 minutes. That is time to plan and to write. And it could be a little bit less. Oftentimes people steal time for their DBQ from their LEQ. So you might be down to say like 30 minutes to write. And so that's, that's not atypical in writing an LEQ for the AP exam. So that really, it really just matters, how much time you give to each. If you're like me, I read a little slowly. So when it comes to the DBQ, it takes me a little bit longer to go through that reading period. But the LEQ, again, you're just choosing one of these. And I want to emphasize, you don't get bonus points for choosing the hardest essay. You choose the one you know the best, meaning the essay that you think is easiest. Based on your knowledge. And if you do that, then you're more likely to write a coherent and strong essay and to have much more evidence. And you get just as many points as the people who chose the essay on the Columbian Exchange last year that everybody thought was oh so easy, but I didn't think so. So let's take a look at the LEQ rubric. Unlike the DBQ, this is only 6 points. You get a point for a thesis, and that thesis has to respond to the prompt and present an argument, present some sort of claim that can, a historical claim. The second thing is contextualization. You may have been taught either to do that in your introductory paragraph or right after the thesis, whatever your teacher told you, you should do that. I teach my kids to put that contextualization right up in the introduction and lead into the thesis. The contextualization is that Star Wars crawl. It's that background information that tells a little bit more about what is going on in the time period of the prompt. Then you, of course, have to use evidence. The LEQ is all about you demonstrating your ability to use evidence to answer the prompt. The low bar point here, the 1 point, is if you provide specific evidence that is just relevant to the prompt. So if you know some pieces of information about the time period and you can give relevant, specific historical evidence, that would be, you could get a point. They change the threshold every year. Last year, it was only 2 pieces. It could be 5 this year. In providing that specific evidence, you need to be, that term specific is important, right? So if you say that there was trade in time period 2, well, that's not specific. But if you said there was trade on the Silk Roads and Indian Ocean Maritime Network, well, there's 2 pieces of evidence. So that's what we mean by being specific. If you say many items are traded or many goods, that's not specific. Instead, you would have to say silk or spices or timber or wine or olive oil or whatever it might be. But that is just the first low bar point, is having that relevant evidence. If you want the second point, you have to use the evidence. You have to use it to support an argument, and that gets you a second point. That is usually using combinations of pieces of evidence to prove your subclaim or your topic sentence and ultimately your thesis. You also get 2 points for analysis and reasoning. The first point for this is using historical reasoning, using change in continuity over time or comparison or causation to frame a historical argument, saying that A caused B, and then explaining how A caused B, or that that some aspect of ancient China was a continuity, perhaps the use of patriarchy was a continuity across time, and then explaining how that is a continuity and using evidence to back that up. That is what we call using historical reasoning. And if you demonstrate complexity, and that's an interesting point that some people might be maybe not so sure about how that looks. So I'm going to actually skip ahead to something I was going to put up later. Oh, I did not put it in here. Well, that's fun. In demonstrating complexity, what you're asked to do is use evidence somehow to to demonstrate an argument that has some sort of historical nuance to it. So maybe looking at like a special case in an argument, or if, for example, your essay is all about change, you look at the other side of the equation. You look at continuities as well, or it's all about similarities. Well, then you also might look at a difference, or perhaps in looking at differences, there's a nuance there that, you know, both China and Rome did something differently than the Gupta Empire, but maybe they did it slightly differently from each other. Right? That might be addressing historical nuance. The last thing that you can do to demonstrate complexity, or one of the last things you can do, is to make to look at alternative viewpoints or alternative arguments. So addressing the fact that what might be an argument against your argument, and then can you explain that, or explain why your argument still holds. That demonstrates complexity in an essay. There are a lot of other ways to do this. You know, it's one of those, I hate to say, you know it when you see it, but you want to really make sure you have a complete essay, not just like, here are 3 effects of something, right? That essay will work. It could get you 5 points on this, but to get that 6th point, you really need to show that high level use of historical analysis. So that's kind of the overview of this LEQ rubric. I'd love to be able to spend more time on it, but we want to get to some other things. And so first of all, let's kind of get to some of the questions that you have, and we'll spend maybe about 3 or 4 minutes thinking about some of these questions, and then we will move on to an activity that I like to do before we write, because it's connected to brainstorming and something I think is very important for attacking an essay question. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's take a look at this first question. We just looked at the rubric, right? So if we are low on time, what are the suggestions to get the most points possible? And man, oh man, this is something that, well, actually, if you're one of my students, we will go over this tomorrow. I wait kind of till the very end to do this with my students. If anybody in Mr. Lasser's class, shout out to you. So the points that you can get for, even if you're low on time, you can actually get a good amount of points the way the rubric is now. And I would advise you, if you have time, to write a complete essay. That is the only way to ensure that you're going to get the most points possible. However, you could, for example, if you're low on time, write a really solid introductory paragraph. And if you have contextualization and a thesis, well, there are 2 points right there. So let's say you took way too long on the DBQ and you're left with 10 minutes left. Well, the first thing you want to do is know what question you're going to answer. Read the questions, have an idea of what you know best, and attack it. Write that contextualization, write that thesis, right? And hopefully that'll get you 2 points. From there, write your first body paragraph. Make sure that you have a good topic sentence, that you're using evidence. Start with whatever aspect of your thesis you have the most evidence for, and make sure to start piling that evidence on and explaining how it supports your argument. And if you can do that within 2 paragraphs right there, you could get 4 points, perhaps. If you have time to write a second body paragraph and you're demonstrating those historical thinking skills, you might get 5 points. It'll probably be quite difficult to get all 6 if you're real short on time. But let's say even if you miss contextualization and you write a good introductory paragraph with a thesis that gets the point and a good body paragraph, you're still looking at 3 points, which, across the nation is typically the average. Though I know people who are joining this chat today, you are likely going to be scoring way higher than that. All right, so that's low on time. What counts as evidence? If you forget specific evidence, what do you do? So as far as evidence, it must be those examples I gave you earlier, right? It must be specific. You can't just say something generic like goods moved along trade networks, or religions moved along trade networks. That is while it's true, it is a vague statement. It is saying that you know a trend, but you don't know specifics about the trend. So what would count as evidence? Naming the specific religions that were traded, naming the specific goods that were traded. If you say, for example, let's look at a different example. We don't have to look back in time periods 2 and 3 with trade. That's on my brain right now. If you were in time period 6 and you were writing about new technologies and how people respond, or how globalization was affected by new technologies, you could say that communication technology allowed for instant communication. And you could explain how that communication used to be slow and how it's now fast. But if you don't give examples of that communication technology, the use of first telegraphs and then telephones and then cellular phones and now smartphones and the internet, then you're not going to get the point unless you give those really specific examples. Now, you don't have to have very specific dates. Names can count as evidence. If you're talking about general empires and you name empires that fit an argument or a trend that you're talking about, that could get you the evidence point. As I said, naming specific goods or religions, that can get you the evidence point. If you were writing about peasant revolts, then saying something about the Yellow Turban Revolt in Han China could get you an evidence point. But that's only the first point, right? You have to use that evidence to support your argument, and that comes through explanation and analysis. So the complex, have a question here about the complex analysis, and that was what I was kind of looking into and explaining a few moments ago. So I'll just kind of point you to that area of the chat. But I would say the answers that some of your fellow students have put in here are really excellent. Stephen Lee here talking about giving a counterclaim to an argument you're making. That can show that you're doing higher order thinking. You're not just, I have 3 things I've memorized in my brain. No, instead you are developing an argument in favor of those things, and you can see the other side. That is complexity. Or as Anjali says here, analyzing both continuity and change, or both similarity and difference. Those are really excellent responses, and those are ways to get that complex analysis. You can do that in one of 2 places. Some people will cover that in their body paragraphs, looking at some of like the nuances or alternative views. Some people will put it in a separate paragraph at the end. Question, how do we get the big context point? Where should we pull from? Also, if we don't know much about the LEQ, what are some strategies? Well, we're going to be thinking about those strategies for answering the LEQ, and we're going to look at one together tonight. But seeing how many people we got in this chat, it's making me a little nervous to write one tonight with you. I got to get a little bit of this Coke Zero, which does not sponsor Fiveable, but sponsors my brain with the caffeine that I get from it. So the big context point, which comes in typically the introduction, what you are being asked to do with that context point is to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. Well, what does this mean? The prompt on these AP exams will give you some sort of context. We'll look at an example in a little bit. We're going to be writing an essay about political ideologies, And the context explains that people in states around the world adopted political ideologies like communism, fascism, nationalism to challenge the existing political and or social order. So if I have to describe a broader historical context, I can't just write about communism, fascism, nationalism. I need to relate that to more of what's going on from 1900 to 2001. That might be talking about the world wars, or talking about the Cold War, or decolonization, or all of it. But hopefully you can get it in a short couple of sentences. So remember, you have to go broader than the prompt itself. You definitely don't want to make the mistake that I see a lot of people make when they start this course, which is, from the dawn of time, ideologies have been around. Simply put, that is that's too broad. You don't want to, if you're writing an essay on the 20th century, you don't necessarily want to go back and say, since the Columbian Exchange, this has happened, because then you're going to find yourself writing a long page of history trying to work up to wherever you are. Think about what's going on within the time period, or something that is immediately relevant to the time period. That immediacy is important. You might want to, go back just a little bit before the time period starts. You can think about, for example, if the essay is about changes or continuities in a specific region, we'll think about what are the broader implications of what's going on in that region. If it was about, for example, say, something to do with Israel, which I don't think you would get something that specific on the LEQ at all. They become more and more general as we've seen over the last few years. The broader historical context might be on how it interacts, how it impacts the entirety of the Middle East, or maybe even the global world. So those are some things to consider. We will write some sample context, or something I think would get the sample context point in a little bit. All right. So let's last question. Somebody's asking, what makes for a good formula for a thesis? And this is where, and actually a couple of your fellow students have a pretty good formula here, acknowledging that while something happened, these other things occurred, or although, as they said, although X occurred, A and B occurred, that caused this event to happen, right? So what you want it to be to present an argument, a historical argument, and you want it to be oftentimes evaluative. These questions that they've been asking have begun asking you to evaluate. And we think about what it means to evaluate. It means to form an idea of the amount, number, or value of something, to assess it. So that might be kind of weighing the effects of something, or assign an importance to it. So how, although there was, 2 or 3 items traded, the most important item traded along the Silk Roads, where it was the Buddhist religion, perhaps. Maybe that could be your argument, but that is evaluative. You are making some sort of judgment, some sort of assessment on the value of an event, historical process, whatever it might be. And as long as you're being evaluative, if it says evaluate, then that's a good formula for a thesis. Okay. Let's get our brains working a little bit. And let's do a little practice. So I'm actually going to start something here that I do with my own classes. And that is something I call Name 5, Name 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perhaps your teachers use something similar with you. And it is a brainstorming tool that I like to use, because when you get to a prompt for an essay, I want you to look at all the options, right? You want to look at the options, answer the question that you know best. And one way of trying to arrive at how even am I going to begin to answer this question and choose something that is meaningful to write about and something I know about and can communicate in a very short amount of time, because this is a rough draft after all, the best way to start that process is brainstorming. So this is basically a drill that I like to use with my students as we review for tests. So brainstorming, of course, is brainstorming what you know is one of the first steps in attacking an essay. So let's say that you got an essay on Atlantic revolutions, as there was actually an essay on a few years back. The essay asks to compare the American, or choosing two of them, compare the American, Haitian, and French revolutions. So this is what I call name 5. So I want you to think about this. You can throw your answers up in the chat. So first of all, let's just focus on the first one. Name 5 Latin American countries that gained independence through revolution. I already see Ryan has their answers up. Let's see what you can come up with. I'll wait a moment and see what you arrive at. And again, you're brainstorming. You don't have to come up with 5 of these. Come up with as many as possible. Ooh, like somebody throws Gran Colombia in there, Bolivar's country. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily stay together. Seeing a lot of great answers here. Haiti, Mexico's coming up a lot. Argentina, seeing some good ones. I'm also seeing some that are not necessarily Latin American countries that gain independence through revolution in this time period. Keep in mind that Cuba is not independent until after the United States fights the Spanish-American War. So take Cuba out of there. Brazil, well, it doesn't necessarily gain independence through total revolution. The country has a king and they declare independence, but not necessarily through a violent revolution. Saint Domingue, another name for Haiti. So a lot of really good answers here. So we can pick, for the most part, the countries of South America, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, the countries that make up Gran Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, right? They gain independence through those Latin American revolutions. We also throw in Haiti. Remember, it's part of Latin America, Mexico. Those are all excellent answers. Now let's move on to this next one. All right, let's think, we want to bring up evidence. Perhaps we're writing about the French Revolution and we want to write about the process of the French Revolution. Can you name 4 important events during the French Revolution? Things that might be relevant to an argument about the revolution in France. All right, seeing we got some answers here. Siege of the Bastille, good. Reign of Terror, tennis court oath, excellent. The execution of Louis XVI, good. Somebody had up here, I think, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. That's an excellent one based on Enlightenment ideas. The Women's March on Versailles, excellent. Think about if you took a view in an essay talking about the role of women in, say, the American and French revolutions. That would be excellent if you could come up with a couple examples that would strengthen your argument. The development of a national assembly, very good. So you're getting the idea here. We're not going to go through all of these. Caused the American Revolution, issues of representation, taxation, natural rights, the British government abolishing colonial legislative bodies. So those are all things that caused the American Revolution. Leaders of Latin American revolutions, Bolivar. Give me some others. Jose de San Martin is a really great example of these Latin American revolution leaders. I'm blanking in Haiti. Somebody put in the chat, leader of the Haitian Revolution. Help me out here. Help me out. waiting on the delay here. Toussaint, exactly. There we go. Jacob Gambino, nice job. Toussaint Louverture. Claire Aston, good job. Amelia, awesome. Mimi, great job. Juanita at 18, something, something, something. All great answers. So thank you for that, for bailing me out my own brainstorming here at the end of a long day. Lastly, one successful slave revolt that led to independence. That's Haiti, right? So, we're thinking about this time period. We're thinking about the period 1750 to 1900, and predominantly with American revolutions or Atlantic revolutions, about 1750 to 1825, 1830 or so. If knowing, trying to come up with whatever we can quickly is going to let us start writing a little bit faster. And that process of brainstorming and developing your thesis planning should take you about 5 minutes. Some of us do take more time than that to plan our essays, but that means you just need to write a little bit faster to make up for that time. For some people, they're ready to go in just a couple of minutes, and then they develop their information as we go. And I would argue that brainstorming happens typically for them in their heads if you're not writing it down. So let's go from here, everybody, to the prompt that we're going to write today. This is a prompt from last year's College Board exam. It's a released FRQ. And I'm going to have you write with me today, and hopefully kind of write an essay alongside us. I will try to type mine and do this as best I can and just walk you through my thought process as I type this essay. Down at the bottom, there is an action item, tonight's LEQ practice. That'll create a copy of the document that I'm going to be in, and I'm actually about to move you over to in just a second. And you can type on your own. You can follow me in the window with it next to it if you would like. So let me make that adjustment, and we will take a look at this prompt in our next window. All right, close this and see if I can cast a new. How's everybody feeling so far? Put it 1 to 5. How you feeling right now? Hopefully, so far we've covered some items that are of note. I know we got a lot of questions down in the chat, so that's really, really great. So just 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. How are we feeling tonight? A lot of 4s popping up. Let's see if we can get this screen to move over. All right. So we're going to do our best to work together in this LEQ practice. All right, getting a lot of 3s. People who are not feeling great, maybe a little tired. I can't emphasize enough. Next week, or tomorrow night, not next week, tomorrow night, get some rest. That'll really help you. But the fact that you are here tonight, registered for this event, and taking a little bit of time out to practice some multiple choice definitely shows a lot about your dedication to the course. So here we are, LEQ practice, Fiveable review. Everything here, most everything that you see, these images, they are from the College Board. So using them just here to go through for just to give us an example. Now, I will say this. The directions will give you 3 options, and you can take a look at the College Board resources to see what the other 2 essays were last year. We're going to focus on question 4 from last year's exam, or at least last year's released exam. And it just says, in the period 1900 to 2001, people and states around the world adopted political ideologies such as communism, fascism, or nationalism to challenge the existing political and or social order. So it's basically just kind of giving you a little heads up. Here are some ideologies you might want to write about. They challenge the existing political order. How governments operated and how states interact with one another, or they challenge the social order, or both, meaning social hierarchy perhaps, or how people interact. This says, then we get to what the directions for the prompt. Develop an argument that evaluates, there's that word evaluate, how one or more of these political ideologies challenged the existing political and or social order. Now, what I want to do is highlight a couple of terms here, although I can't highlight it because I screenshotted it. But I want to draw your attention to this. First of all, we've talked about the word evaluate. But here, how one or more of these political ideologies challenged the existing political and social order. So one or more of these political ideologies, communism, fascism, or nationalism. That means you can deal with all three of them, or you can deal with two of them in any combination, or just one of them. You could write a whole paper just on communism, except, or just on fascism, or just on nationalism. I'm going to leave out fascism tonight, I think, just because I figure I would get into like too many details talking about that one. And then I want to draw your attention to another thing, how they challenge the existing political and or social order. If that said and, our thesis and our essay would have to address both. But it says and or, so I can address political and social, or just one of the two. And so that's important to me because I want to know exactly what I'm writing about. I want to make sure that I am writing the correct thing and that I'm not leaving anything out. You know, this essay could have been a lot harder if it said, develop an argument that evaluates how two of these ideologies challenge the existing political and social order. That's a lot bigger task than one or more challenge political and or social order. So pay attention to those words. They are important. Those conjunctions are something we need to pay attention to. In this case, you had options. That might not be the case on Thursday. It might ask you to do a bigger ask. So just want to make that real clear. So the first thing I want to do when I go about writing an essay is I want to brainstorm. What do I know about this topic? And apologize. First of all, my apologies if you can hear me typing today. And I also have my computer like up on this thing, so I'll probably end up with carpal tunnel. The first thing I want to think about is, all right, what do I know about each of these? So communism, I know that it challenged, if I'm thinking about the existing political and social order, it challenged democracies, during World War I. It challenged capitalism and the social order of industrialization, the industrial social order. I know that communism dealt with the overthrow of the Russian czars, which is something that I might be able to write about. I know that communism led to anti-imperialism in different regions of the world. So, in Vietnam, it stands out to me as one that I tend to know a little bit about. Also thinking about Cuba, right? The socialist, communist revolutionaries there that fought against Western imperialism. So that might be something that I know a good bit about. Fascism rises in Germany and Italy. It challenges the world order during World War II. So I'm just, in this case, I'm typing out what I'm brainstorming right now, really for your benefit. At home, I would be either writing really quick notes right now, or I might just be doing this in my head on the essay. And again, I know a lot more about fascism, but I don't have to write it all down. I'm just getting my brain going so that I can develop a thesis. For nationalism, I know a ton about this. This is something, again, 1900 to 2001. So I have to forget what I know about it a little bit in the 1800s and think about it in the 1900s. Well, it's one of the causes for World War I. It's one of the causes for World War II. And it's really important for the process of decolonization. The places that really come to mind for me right now in terms of nationalism are in India. And then I think about the development of like an Arab nationalism or African nationalism, like pan-Arabism. That might be something that I want to write about, because that's something that I know a good deal about. That might not be something that you know a great deal about. So you say, "Ooh, I don't want to write an essay on nationalism and pan-Arabism because I'm not comfortable with that." That's okay. You choose what you know best. You know, I also want to think about how could I craft this into a thesis with my brainstorm, and what might context look like for this. I really like the idea of maybe talking about anti-imperialism in this, or decolonization. Those are two topics that, you know, in my class, we've been covering quite recently. We've talked about a good bit. I've talked about here on Fiveable. So I know those best. And so tonight, I think I'm going to write about those. Also, I think it might be a good opportunity, if you don't know much about them, to teach you a little something. So that's kind of where we're starting from with this brainstorming session. It doesn't have to be long. It took me just a couple minutes, and I'm going to get to writing, thinking about how I'm going to craft a thesis and how I'm going to craft contextualization. Now, let's take a break for just a moment. And what I want you to do in the chat is think about the prompt itself. People in states around the world adopting political ideologies like communism, fascism, nationalism. What are some things, and keeping in mind that I might want to write on imperialism or decolonization, what are some things that might lead me to the contextualization point? All right. And if you can think of some things, you don't have to write a full contextualization. What are some items that I might want to bring up that are immediately relevant to the prompt that offer a broader historical context? I'll wait. Right, because I'm going to start my intro paragraph with contextualization. So let's see. You know, all right, I'm seeing some things that are relevant. I am seeing some things like the Enlightenment. You know, if we can connect the Enlightenment to the rise of nationalism, that might work. Otherwise, you know, that stretches back into the 1600s. That's a long way back. It doesn't seem quite immediately relevant, but it could be, especially if we connect it to nationalism, the rise of nationalism. The World Wars and the Cold War. Yeah, definitely. Industrialization and thinking about the rise of communism. All right. Talking about, if you're thinking about I saw somebody talk about proxy wars. We're thinking about the challenges to the existing political order. That would certainly work. So yeah, a lot of good things in here. Let's see how we want to start this essay. So I'm gonna scroll down, and we're just gonna start the essay right here. Again, this is a draft. Pardon all of my typos that will inevitably come out here, and that we'll be dealing with throughout this essay. I'm going to also turn off my grammar check because I hate seeing those red lines when I'm writing an essay. So hopefully I didn't mess up anything when I just reloaded the screen. I like to check it at the end personally. All right, here we go. So the first thing I want to think about is that this is an essay all about the 20th century. And so if you're typing, what I would encourage you to do is on your copy of the document, go ahead and start typing out your response. And we'll see kind of how it matches up and what we think about this. But I'm thinking about the 20th century. And so I'm just going to ease my way into the paper. The 20th century was a time of, let's say, unique challenges on the global stage. Not the most amazing statement to get started with. The World Wars and the Cold War. I got to type. I'd much rather write this than type it. All conflicts involving major powers of the world. We gotta get this. Let's widen that out so it makes more sense. Involving more powers of the world. These came to define the century, let's say. After World War II, though, the world took on a new face as the process of decolonization, because that's something I'm going to write about. So I want to make a connection and talk about the broader context in the 20th century. So this process of decolonization challenged the imperial system of the past and led to new opportunities. I'm a notoriously bad speller. Across and here I want to think about like broader historical context. I'm thinking about the world, but where specifically are we seeing decolonization challenge imperialism? Well, we see it in Africa, Asia, and even in the Americas with kind of neo-colonialism and economic imperialism. This process was aided by ideologies, because I want to make a connection now between, we've talked about the world wars, the Cold War, after World War II, decolonization occurring in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, right? So we're offering a broader context for understanding these political ideologies and the era that they come about in. Basically, hey, I know some things that happened in the 20th century related to these. The process, let me get back to where we were. The process was aided by ideologies of the 20th. Well, I guess some of these started in the 19th century that found a home in the 20th century. Ooh, that sounds poetic. I don't know if that's good or not, but that's what we're going to put. Even as global capitalism and imperialism, let's see how I want to phrase this, because I want to get into my thesis statement now, pretty much, because I've offered a lot of it. So perhaps even as capitalism and global imperialism, let's say imperialism grew or continued, the rise of communism and or in places, because we want to be specific about communism. I want to talk about communism first, and then I want to talk about nationalism. The rise of communism in places such as, what are my examples? Vietnam and Cuba led to the end of colonial, and in Cuba's case, neo-colonial rule, or control might be a better word. Elsewhere, nationalists. So I want to go to my second part of this thesis. I'm looking here at the brainstorming stuff that I did on paper, trying to get this together. Elsewhere, we see nationalist ideologies uniting. Elsewhere, nationalist ideologies united. Unite the populations of India and the Middle East, because I want to talk about Pan-Arabism against European domination. All right. Wow. Thanks for sticking through me with that one. I really don't want to look at the comments as you comment on my maybe perhaps talking out loud as I type. So hopefully you can forgive me. So let's take a look at this. My thesis here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight for you. I want to say that, even as global capitalism and imperialism continued perhaps into the 20th century, it was the rise of communism in places such as Vietnam and Cuba or the rise of these things led to the end of colonial and neo-colonial control, right? So I'm connecting the ideology to the challenge to the existing political order. And then elsewhere, nationalist ideologies united populations in India, maybe like a social political change, and the Middle East against European domination. So that is going to be the crux of my argument. I'm likely going to see here 2 to 3 body paragraphs, depending on if I can fit it all together. And then here at the beginning, I have contextualization. And I would say my contextualization really comes in, not in this first sentence necessarily, talking about the world wars and decolonization in the Americas. This is where that contextualization shows up, okay? Placing these new ideologies, these new challenges in a little bit of a broader historical context. And again, this is not given information. It doesn't say anything about decolonization of the World War specifically, so I have a lot of room to talk about. So from here, we want to go and type our body paragraphs, or I guess you would be writing your body paragraphs in the case of the AP exam. So let's get started with that. In your paragraphs, first, as you notice, I've indented. Please indent for your readers. It makes looking at paragraphs much easier. And then using transitions and topic sentences really helps. So again, if anything, at least in this, you'll get a little bit of information about the process of communism in Vietnam and Cuba, and nationalism in India and the Middle East. But hopefully you will also be getting an idea of how I go about attacking this essay. So firstly, I'm going to try to turn my voice off here. I think that'll help me speed up a little bit. If you want, because you're going to have access to this later, go ahead and just spend a little bit of time, mute the computer, type out your own first body paragraph or introductory statement, and then we'll take a look at the paragraph that I get when I'm finished typing it. All right, so where I'm at right now is I'm in this essay, I'm writing about the use of communism as Ho Chi Minh sought to challenge the authority of France. That's the first thing, and really focusing on how communism led to anti-imperialist ways of thought. So Ho Chi Minh led his forces against the French, hoping to break free of French control. This was based, because what I need to explain, in a communist ideology of bringing control of the government to the people of Vietnam. He Well, all right. So now I want to also bring in against the U.S., thinking about challenging that political order. His war was eventually waged against the United States as well, as the U.S. sought to contain communism in North Vietnam, a major policy of the Cold War era for the U.S. So similarly, the U.S. attempted to support a friendly So here I've kind of written myself into an area where I want to talk about how communism pushed back against the political order of the United States. Fidel Castro, the U.S. attempted to contain communism in Cuba. The communist-leaning forces of Fidel Castro, I'll use the term pushed back, although I think I use that too much in my writing, against American and other Western economic imperialism. This was slightly different, thinking about nuance here, than the situation in Vietnam, fighting against direct governmental control. And so now I'm probably at a place where I want to wrap this paragraph up. Ultimately, both of these, both Vietnam and Cuba, succeeded in, excuse my typos, outlasting the Western powers. And then I want to make sure that I am ending with this idea that, both countries used communism to plot a new course for themselves. Well, what is that course? They fought to eliminate Western domination of their countries. And so here I want to end my paragraph by really hammering that home as best I can, use the language of the prompt as well. New governments, I should be typing to talk here, I think, caused political balance to shift and quickly undertook programs to redistribute land and nationalize resources, leading to further social and economic change. Oh, I think this paragraph was too long, but that's what happens when I start typing, folks. I'm sorry. All right, so the end of this paragraph. And hey, folks in the chat, look at you. You're still here. Can you believe it? Like I can't understand how you still made it. So, in terms of this, I think that paragraph took me like 6 or so minutes to type while I was talking to you guys. So it's certainly probably take you about 5 minutes to think through it and type it, to write it, if you're writing about something that you know about, right? But just going through this paragraph, there are lots of examples of evidence here, talking about the region where communism is used, French Indochina, Ho Chi Minh leading his forces against the French, using his ideologies, and then there's explanation. U.S. policy of containment, sought to contain communism, a major policy, that'd be a piece of evidence. Communist leading forces of Fidel Castro, another piece of evidence there. And then here, kind of this trying to look at the nuance and the difference between the situations. Fidel Castro overthrowing a government of Cuba, an independent government of Cuba, although seen as a puppet of Western powers, and then Vietnam fighting for its own independence, first against France, and then in uniting the country together under communism. I'm going to attempt here to talk through a little bit more of this. So I'm going to use a tool here and use voice typing. So let's take a look at what our next paragraph might be on, and I'll probably have to perhaps even just wrap it up after paragraph 2 if I'm running long, because when the essay comes about and the topics come up on this paper, the essay, or you're writing the essay, if you're running out of time, you got to just stick with your best argument. And so I could talk about Pan-Arabism here, which I know a lot about, but I think instead what I'm going to do is focus on the use of the use of nationalism in India as my second argument. That's probably all I would have time for, because I took so long on that first argument. So I think another thing to consider is just utilizing your time and using the arguments you know best. I'm just going to, at this point, cut my argument on Pan-Arabism. It's fine that it sits there in the thesis, but I'm just not going to carry it through to the end. So hopefully the nuance that I take a look at in the rest of the essay will play a role. All right, so my second body paragraph, what do I need to say? Well, I need to address, maybe make a connection with my introductory paragraph, and then talk about how nationalism led to a change in political or social situations in India. All right. While both Vietnam and Cuba had elements of nationalism, it was the independence movement in India which embodies how this ideology led to a change in the social and political order, period. The nationalist movement in India began in the 19th century in response to British imperialism, period. The Sepoy Rebellion of 1857 created a national history and connection, while the English language and British introduced Western education, provided the means by which nationalist ideas spread, period. Oh, this is way faster. Y'all should have told me to do this a minute ago. Obviously, there's some typos in here with capitalization, but that's something that I would not be making were I writing this, I hope. So thinking about elements of nationalism, the independence movements, India embodies how that led to a change in social political order. That's this paragraph. The nationalist movement began in the 19th century, which is out of the time period, but I just want to provide a little bit of back history, the idea of creating this national identity. And then we'll carry out in the argument, hopefully, how this happens. So that's something I need to do, always making sure I'm going back and answering the prompt. And so far, I have not done so in this paragraph. All right. In India, the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League fanned the flames of nationalism, period. Led by Mohandas Gandhi, the Indian National Congress used non-violent resistance to push for independence when it did not come as promised after World War I, period. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, also worked with the INC on this organized challenge to the existing political situation in India, eventually succeeding with independence in 1947, period. I hope that I got everything I was trying to write. And I forgot to turn off the microphone. All right. Thanks for sticking with me, guys, as I try to deal with technology today. Although nationalism was, for a time, a uniting force in India, it also led to the ultimate split of India and Pakistan, period. Seeking a unified India, Gandhi pushed to keep all of India together, while Jinnah sought a separate nation for Muslims in South Asia due to fears that living under a Hindu-dominated India would not be in the best interest of his constituency, period. Jinnah eventually succeeded, and the independent countries of India and Pakistan were created, period. This decolonization and partition show the unique abilities of nationalism as a uniting and dividing force in the political and social order, period. And it's at this point that I know time-wise, I'm going to be running out of time. I'm looking here and thinking about how did nationalism lead to this social order or this change in political and social order. And in India, it led to uniting them together against the British, but it also led to here we have Jinnah spelled wrong. It led to kind of a Muslim nationalism and a Hindu nationalism, which eventually made these countries split and the partition take place. And so that's what I'm trying to get after here. I will say, in cutting out my last paragraph, I don't know if I'll get the complexity point. I think this part of talking about nationalism, the nuance of the fact that it brought India together to get rid of the British government through nonviolent practices, but it also led to that split. I think I might get the nuance point, but I feel it's up in the air if I don't get my last argument in. But for the sake of time, I just simply do not have the time to do that. And that might be what you find on the AP exam. It's not the end of the world if that's the case. From there, you simply want to make sure that you can close out your paper. In your concluding paragraph, I want to make sure that you know that you can restate your thesis there. You probably won't be making a major argument, but if you get to the end of the paper, for example, here I've gotten to the end and I have not talked about the Middle East, I might want to, I want to restate my thesis, really making sure that I answer the prompt and that I am addressing what I argued in the paper. So I really want to talk about the role of communism in challenging the political order in Vietnam and the social order in Cuba. And I want to address the idea that nationalism led to a change in the political order in India, the existing political order. So in restating that thesis, I would probably just cut out what I had about the Middle East. I could also go back and line it out in my intro paragraph, but if I'm running out of time, I simply can't do that. So, I think, first of all, thanks for sticking with me over the last, I guess we were about on 20 minutes of writing for this essay, maybe about 25 minutes, which is not the full 40, but I think it's pretty clear that I had come up with some ideas of stuff to write about earlier today. So I have a little bit of an advantage. I will say that when I wrote this out earlier this afternoon, I was able to get 3 paragraphs in 35 minutes, but keeping in mind that I teach the subject, I had a lot of stuff, and I graded this question last year. So I was pretty sure of certain things that might fall in this question. Most people, let me just kind of give you some heads up on the question last year. Most people with this one wrote about some other topics. For example, the rise of Nazi Germany and its it leading to World War II and the Holocaust. World War II being a challenge to the political order, the Holocaust being a challenge to the social order. A lot of people wrote about the Bolshevik communist revolution, challenging the existing political order and social order of Russia. A lot of people wrote about Mao's communist revolution in China, challenging the political and social order there. I remember I read about Al-Qaeda challenging the modern political order with their fundamentalist ideologies. So those are all things that you could write about in this. And if they came to the front of your mind, then good for you, because those are some excellent topics that would play into this essay. So that said, we are looking at this LEQ, and it's a pretty hefty thing, but you can do it. If you brainstorm stuff, all you got to do is make sure that you're going back and answering that question. Here, if I'm grading this, there is a lot of evidence that I can mark. I can mark that in red in the first one. I know I'm going to get at least 3 points within the first. I'll just highlight Ho Chi Minh and Fidel Castro. Right, they're relevant pieces of evidence talking about communism in this. I'm up to 3 points already, just halfway through that second paragraph. I use them as evidence in supporting an argument. So there's a 4th point. I am in answering this question, talking about changes, right? The challenges to the existing social and political order and the processes. So I'm using causation. I'm using change of continuity over time. And I'm even, if I had a chance to write that last paragraph, I'm even comparing Vietnam and Cuba. So here I have some compare and contrast. So those are historical thinking skills. Up there, you up to 5 points. Now, I'd like to think I get the 6th point for nuance in this second body paragraph, but maybe I do, maybe I don't. It's up to the grader. I wouldn't get to grade my own paper, and neither do you. So you just got to hold out hope. Is that what's best? All right. So I'm going to leave that there. In fact, I will link this. Well, you have it here. You can go back, of course, and take a look at it. And you have a copy of this document. So I don't think I need to link it right here because I have the link at the bottom already. What I want to do now is throw back up our presentation and just answer some questions. Certainly, you might have some questions about things I wrote about. You might have questions about the LEQ in general, and I'll stay around for about another 10 minutes and answer those. So let's see if we can get that up. Got our sample essay. We've already done that. We want to focus on some questions from you guys, the audience. And man, have there been a lot of questions populated. So let's see what our highest questions are. All right, top vote. 34 people agree with this assessment of themselves that Jason has here. So I spend like 20 minutes on writing an intro in my first body paragraph, which is mainly for me trying to figure out how to write a thesis and analyzing as well as sourcing the document. What do I do? So when you're thinking about sourcing a document, you're thinking about the DBQ, which doesn't necessarily apply here to the LEQ. But what I would say is spend some time thinking, slowing down a little bit and just, I think in the LEQ, it's in brainstorming. In the DBQ, I always tell people, as you read the documents, how does each document answer the question? And the document's asking you to evaluate the responses to the spread of Buddhism. Well, does each document have a positive response, or does it perhaps encourage the spread of Buddhism? Is it critical of Buddhism? Is it ambivalent about it? Each document answers the prompt in a certain way. And when you start to see the same answer from multiple ones, those are things that you might want to include in your thesis. That's the same thing with brainstorming. If I'm brainstorming my answer to an LEQ and I see that I have a lot of evidence for something and I know a lot about it, I'm going to be more likely to write that. you can't be too perfectionist in writing these LEQs. And that is why today in crafting my LEQ earlier in the day, I wrote it. I looked over it once to make sure it did the things I want to do, and I didn't look at it again. The essay that I just wrote with you guys is by no means perfect. I mean, heck, I can't even decide whether or not I'd get 6 points on it. So it's by no means perfect. We know that as readers. Excuse me. We are looking for the fact that you can use historical thinking skills. So if you're not completely sold on your thesis, just write the best thesis you can in the introduction. And then by the time you get to the end of the paper, if you have well-developed paragraphs, you can go back and look back at your paper and rewrite your thesis again in a more complete form. Don't let that development of an entire thesis and trying to phrase it perfectly keep you from writing the paper. Do your best, create a starting thesis, and try to build off of that. But if you add to it or subtract from it, as I had to do tonight, excuse me, my voice is going as we get closer to the AP exam. Typically, it will disappear by the end of the day tomorrow. And if you join me and Amanda here tomorrow for last minute questions on the AP World Exam, where we'll be answering as many as possible, then you will find that my voice might be entirely gone. Anyways, that's my advice. Don't get bogged down. Don't have writer's block because you don't feel like you can put down a good thesis. Put down whatever you have based on your knowledge. You're smart kids. You're taking the class. You've had a year of this stuff. And from there, you can write your essay. And if you need to revise that thesis, put it in the conclusion. All right. 35 upvotes. How many pieces of evidence do you recommend for each assertion in our LEQ? So for each assertion or body paragraph, I think the rule of 3 applies. 3 pieces of evidence for each body paragraph at minimum. But if you know more and you can chock that thing full of evidence, then put more in there. If you're writing about trade and you know 10 things that are traded that you can rattle off your head out of your head, then put 10 things, like whatever you have to do. I mean, not where it costs you time, but there's no reason to just put, on the Silk Road, silk was traded when you also know that religions like Buddhism and Christianity were moved along the Silk Road when diseases like smallpox and influenza, or smallpox and measles, and the bubonic plague spread along the Silk Road, right? So, don't just give one example. If you know more than one, you can throw a couple in there. They count as individual pieces of evidence. So I would say in an entire paper, I think a strong paper would have somewhere around 7 or more pieces of evidence total. Although the threshold for the points has been lower in the past couple of years. That is not to say what it'll be this year, but it'll likely be just 2 pieces of evidence that support an argument as kind of the low threshold, because in the last few years, they've really emphasized that explanation and analysis. But one thing that makes that explanation and analysis better is having a lot of examples, specific historical examples. All right, I've heard we should learn to connect ideas and themes together. My question is exactly how do we do that? As in, where do we start? So Hannah has a good answer here, and that's with the historical thinking skills, right? Look at the essay prompt. For this essay, it was an argument that evaluates how one or more of these ideologies challenge the existing political order. So you can focus on causation there. You can start there. You could talk about the changes that result from communism. For example, you could compare the changes from communism in Russia to the changes in communism in the political and social order of China, for example. There's a lot of ways that you can go with these questions, but you got to just decide how you want to attack it. And that'll help you connect your paragraphs together. If it's comparison, that's how you're going to transition from one to another. If it's causation, you want to show perhaps the entire process. The But I think Hannah's right. You want to start with clear historical thinking skills and attacking the question with what you know best. What is HIP? Oh, okay. So this is in reference to what you were asked to do, and you may have seen it in the chat, what you're asked to do in a document-based question. For a DBQ, and we have some videos on DBQ that you can go take a look at, you were asked to source 3 documents. And when we say source 3 documents, we mean analyze those documents for one of 4 things: historical context, H; intended audience, I; purpose or point of view, PP. Sometimes it's called CAP, context, audience, purpose, point of view. You only have to analyze each document using one of those things, and only 3 documents in total for the whole essay to get the point. However, that can be difficult to do because it takes a lot of time. You have to analyze it in a way that supports your argument. So you can't just say, oh, well, Marco Polo is biased because he's European. Well, if that doesn't support your argument, then it won't work. But if your essay was on how travelers viewed, that would be a good DBQ this year, how travelers viewed societies they were unfamiliar with, well, then the biases that are shown by Marco Polo in the way he talks about the Chinese, for example, or the Mongols, might be relevant to your argument in saying that these travelers had an incomplete understanding of other cultures, or that they could not overcome their own preconceived notions of the other side, something along those lines. Again, I'm talking in hypotheticals here because it's kind of difficult when we're thinking about these essays. All right, let's take a look at one more of these. What if I don't know what to write about? Say I panic and my mind goes blank. You know, this is something students deal with. And I'm not going to say that nobody on this chat will deal with it, although there are 951 of you who signed up for this. So the hundreds of you, certainly it might happen. But let me tell each and every one of you that you have spent a year in this course. You know stuff. You know how to answer these questions. You might be thrown off by how they ask the question or the language that they use. But if you just spend a little time, I would say breathe a little bit, take a deep breath if you get to that point, if you feel like your mind's going blank, and just slow down. So you know, look at my example tonight. If you don't get all 3 body paragraphs that you want written, you can still get a hefty amount of points with 1 or 2 body paragraphs if need be. So try your best to remember. You get a choice of essays for the LEQ. So pick the one that you are getting some clarity with and attack that one. For the DBQ, the answer is all right in front of you. The one thing I have to say is trust yourself. Attack the question, answer it. You know, the idea of going into the AP exam and wasting that hour and a half should not be in your mind in the least. I can't tell you how sad it makes me when I read an AP exam, an essay, and you know, it's that they leave it blank, or they write 1 or 2 lines and then, you know, just draw pictures, right? That is not something that you need to allow yourself to do, because you put the work in, follow through all the way to the end. You can do it. You know, we're not judging what, you know, you personally on what you know and don't know. We just want to see, can you create an argument? Can you make an argument related to a historical process? And there's still points out there that you can get, even if you feel like you're going blank. Use that brainstorming process. Think about what you know in the time period, what you know, as Lynn is saying here, what you know about the topic at hand, and do your best to answer the question. Even if the thesis isn't right on, you might get the contextualization point, or you might get some evidence points. All right. So it is getting late, guys. It is almost 10:30, so I've got to wrap it up because I have an AP course to deal with tomorrow. Also got a video to record tonight, and you can hear my voice is almost done for. What I will say is thank you so much for joining tonight. Actually, if you want to take a quick screenshot, here's another brainstorming activity for a name 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that I thought we might run short on time, so I threw that in there. But you can go back and take a screenshot of that in a little bit. But I really think that for the folks of you who are here engaging this, that this kind of work will pay off every little bit. Don't let yourself get in your head. If you weren't happy with my writing, you certainly have the right to feel that way, especially listen to me ramble for the last hour and a half. But I'm your host, Patrick Lassiter. I really enjoyed being with you tonight. This is my favorite time of year because on Thursday at 8 a.m., when you go in to take that test, it's all going to pay off. So have a great night, and I will talk to you tomorrow. I'll be here with Amanda tomorrow night. And we'll answer your last minute questions, the things that are burning in your brain and keeping you from going to sleep. Thank you for the kind words as people have it in the chat here. What is the rule of 3? The rule of 3 means that you have 3 arguments in response to the prompt, or you deal with 3 topics, and that you have 3 pieces of evidence for each argument. So that is what we have, what we're referencing in the rule of 3. I saw that in the chat. Great question to end